So please guys, don't make noises. I'm recording this. Okay, online. So we're going to start the lecture. We're going to talk about the events that took place with maybe 20 minutes, and then for the rest we're going to leave it for questions. So last time we talked about part 4 of the story of Muhammad, part 3 of the story of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we talked about his teachings basically, because now he is the leader of Medina, a city where they needed a leader who is a role model and who can give them directions in the straight path. And they saw that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the right man for this. So when he came there, he also teach them lessons that are from the Holy Quran, and it is those sayings that we talked about last Sunday, and we expect that all of you try to apply those lessons in your day-to-day life. So today we're going to talk about the final part, is the conquest of Mecca and the farewell message that he gave before he passed away. So what happened after his settlement in Medina is that the polytheists couldn't accept Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam message, and they still wanted to go against him. So what they did is that they tried to sell their belongings in Mecca, and people were protesting about it. And Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam received a message from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through Gabriel, who gave him the order to protect what belonged to them, meaning those merchandise that people were taking from them, from their houses, and selling it somewhere else in Syria. So what happened is that they raised an army by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This army wasn't that big because they didn't have much resources. There were only 313 soldiers. So these 313 soldiers weren't there to attack, but to take what belongs to them to defend. Because in Islam, whenever you raise the sword, it's not about attacking, but only defending what belongs to you, or defending your people, to protect them from any danger. So they would gather and walk to his location, and the polytheists knew where they were going, so they wanted to fight the Muslims because they were less. The polytheists were like 1,000 soldiers. So this is a very big disadvantage if you were to say, like, they are more people, so they're going to win. And this is what we're going to call the Battle of Badr. This is the battle that took place during the 17th day of Ramadan. So the Muslims were fasting at this time, and Allah gave them victory even though they were outnumbered and they were fasting. Because in this story, each Muslim soldier was surrounded by angels, and these angels will participate in the fight. And this fight is literally human beings and angels fighting human beings. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them victory. So this is a very important thing to do, is that in life, whenever things seem difficult, Allah can, support you at the end. So the polytheists lost, they got angry, they couldn't accept it, so they organized another battle. And in this battle, the Muslims made a mistake, because the leader of the soldiers, Khalid ibn Walid, astaghfirullah, not even Khalid ibn Walid, but it was Hamza. Hamza was the leader before Khalid converted to Islam. He gave orders for the Muslim to position in a specific spot, but they didn't listen, because they thought that they can win no matter what. But at the end, they lost this battle. So that's also an important lesson. Don't be too confident. Always follow recommendations of others. But that didn't discourage them, because the Muslims still continued spreading Islam. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would give messages to Muslims, and these Muslims would travel to other countries and they would go to their leaders so that they can receive the message of Islam, understand its teachings, and it was very successful. Many of them followed the deen. Please turn off your phones. Many of them follow the deen. So they all had a larger community. Can you guys please turn off your phones? They had a large community of Muslims, and the polytheists were afraid for this large gathering. And they would expect that the Muslims would come to Mecca, the holy city, where they would worship Allah, and they would take advantage of that to hurt them. But in Islam, that wasn't the case, because in this religion, it's all about mercy. Even though what you're doing is right and the others are wrong, you go at ease with them until they understand that this is right. That is the big lessons that you guys can learn from there. So at this point, the Muslim would come to Mecca and officially make it a Muslim nation, a Muslim city, led by Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam wouldn't stay there for long, because he would after return to Medina, where he would continue his Islamic teachings. And at this point, he didn't have much time left. As he will explain in this video, his last farewell message to the Muslim nations, because he knew that his time would come to leave this world. So I would want everybody to listen carefully to this video. I will not talk. I'm going to play this video. It's taken from the message. It's not exactly his sayings, but I would say it's a resume, like they're resuming in this movie the speech that he gave, so that you guys can understand it. So after this video, you guys can ask your questions and we will end the lecture there. So everybody pay attention.
I know. Just press speech button.
Share sound.
Muhammad took no revenge and allowed none. He declared Mecca a holy place. No one may shed blood, or cut down a tree, or kill a living thing in Mecca. Soon all Arabia was converted, not only to the new worship, but to the new laws, manners, attitudes contained in Islam. He lived to see his work done, but now he began to feel the nearness of death. One great act of his prophethood remained, the setting of its seal. He called the people to him, and he spoke for the last time his message of surrender to God and humanity to man. O mankind, listen well. I may not be with you much longer. The weak among you, feed them on what you eat. Dress them as you are dressed. You will meet your God, and he will call you to account for your actions. Let those who are present warn those who are absent. You are all descended from Adam, and the best among you is he who most regards God. Think deeply about what I say. Let all your feuds be abolished. You must know that every Muslim is the brother of every other Muslim, and all Muslims are brothers one with another. Between Muslims there are no races and no tribes. Nor must you take anything from your brother except what is given freely. Do not oppress, and do not be oppressed. O my people, I am but a man. It may be that the angel of death will visit me soon, and death will overtake me.
No, no, you behave
But I have
okay.
left you a book
You're doing so good,
revealed by God,
and you want to stop now.
the Quran,
That's not cool.
which
Just
is light
listen there.
and guidance. Now he repeated to the people the final revelation of the Quran, the seal and termination.
You do like that.
Not Muhammad's words, but God's word. This day I have perfected your religion for you, and completed my favor to you, and have chosen for you Islam as your religion. On June the 8th, 632, in his 63rd year, Muhammad died. Many of his followers could not believe the fact. How can such a man die? But Abu Bakr, the Prophet's friend, stood up in the mosque. If anyone worships Muhammad, let him know that Muhammad is dead. But he who worships God, let him know that God is alive and cannot die. They buried Muhammad beside his mosque in Medina. But the religion he preached found its place in the heart of man. It endured. It multiplied. Still to Mecca they come, mankind. The people of Islam dressed in their pilgrim white. All equal before God, all united in this place of prayer. Each individual soul joined in a community of worship. One God.
Okay guys, we're going to stop there. So that was the final speech of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And everything is educational, because you're memorizing the Quran, you're memorizing many other books, but the most important thing is, what is the end game? What is the goal of that knowledge? It's all about us, to be obedient to Allah and to work for Allah on this earth. That's it. And you cannot be obedient if you don't recognize God, if you don't accept what He has created, meaning your brothers, these human beings, the respect you show them, the good behavior you show them, is all about respecting Allah's creation. So that is the final part. And I'm telling you guys, every day in your life, remember Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Remember him through prayers, through the Salat ala Nabi, but always remember him through his sayings. Try to apply his sayings in your day-to-day life. Say Bismillah before you do something. That's something he used to do, so you guys have to do that. Alright? Try your best every day. Remember something about him and try to apply it in your life. So now we're going to take the questions online first. Okay, Leifa, you raise your hand. Can you tell me your question?
How much people visit the mosque, and where is the mosque located?
You mean that's the Kaaba, this mosque you're seeing right now?
Yeah.
So that is in Mecca. Right? They build the mosque around the Kaaba. It's in Mecca.
Well, was that Muhammad's house or something?
It's not the same. Do you remember that place called Medina? So when he went there, that's where they built his house, in that mosque where that is the second mosque they built, because the first mosque, if you remember, it's at Quba. But that's where they built the second mosque, and currently that mosque has expanded very large. Now after he lived there, he went to Mecca, and when they conquered Mecca, that's when they built this third mosque here that you see.
Are people allowed to be inside?
Inside Mecca? Yeah, if you're a Muslim.
What are you turning?
I don't know.
Inside.
I don't know if the.
Chewy.
You mean what?
Chewy. Inside like the house.
Oh, the Kaaba, only officials. Like if you're like a president, a leader of a country, you're allowed to go inside. But if you're a regular guy like me, you have to stay outside. Because you know, not everybody can go inside. You understand?
And last question, how many people visit the Kaaba or like the Mecca?
So people live in the outskirts because before people used to have houses that are closer to the Kaaba. But when the Muslims came, they removed those houses and made it a mosque, and so they would live like further outside of that area. Alright. Did that answer your questions?
I was like saying that how many people visit.
Oh, like billions, a lot. That is non-stop. It's the Muslim world, so every single Muslim who is able to go, like goes, and you know, if you're able to, it's an obligation.
It opens all day.
It opens all day. Yeah. Okay, that's it. Alright, so I'm gonna go to Hali Gate.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
So I got a question about the message. So
How he was like, he was kind of saying like a poem, like a poem, I meant.
A poem?
Saying like, saying words about Allah and words about that he might die, he's gonna die, and the angels will come down.
Uh-huh.
For that, did that happen? Because as soon as he said that, it like cut over to like people. It cut over to like it says like there was a lot of people that was surrounding the Kaaba.
Can you ask your question again? I didn't hear one.
So you know how he was saying like a poet about saying that.
So it's not a poem, it's a speech. It's a speech, it's not a poem. It's his own teachings to the people. So what specifically did you want to know?
I wanted to know like how he died, basically.
Okay, so that's gonna be a side story. So he knew that he was gonna pass away.
No.
Because you know, as many prophets, people who are close to Allah, Allah notifies you when your time would come. It's not everybody, it's those specific people. Now, what happened after this speech, one day in his house, there was a child who knocked on his door. Now, at this point, Fatima, one of his daughters, was there. She opened the door and she saw the child. And you know, as children, she would say like, go away, like that stuff. So the child left. And now, all of a sudden, when she went to the room of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, she saw the child again. Now understand that Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was ill. He was sick. So he stayed in bed. And she found this child. And she told him, why are you here? How did you get in here? But Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam notified Fatima that this is not an ordinary child. This is the angel of death disguised as a child. So she left the room. And the angel of death would come because he was going to take his soul. So that's how he passed away.
Okay.
Yeah. So Fatu and Muhammad Young, you have questions?
Not really a question. I'm just saying that my dad has been before.
Say it again.
This is not really a question. I'm just saying that my dad has been to Mecca before.
Yeah, like Mecca, that's the final pillar of Islam. If you have good health, you have the money to travel, it's an obligation for you to perform it. So your dad did well going when he can. Okay? And you don't need to go many times. You go one time, you fulfill the 5 pillars. But the importance is that when you go to Mecca, it's all about building your relationship with Allah. You know? So, but everybody has to keep that in mind. If you're able to, you'll have to go. Does anybody else have questions? Okay, I'm gonna ask those who are in person. Do you have questions? Yeah.
How did you see how many people are there, right?
Yeah.
How did they travel west, like to Africa, like?
Oh.
And then there's like some Muslims that are like in China, like I know a Filipino that's like Muslim, stuff like that. Like how did they migrate?
So, are you talking about back then, or are you talking about this era?
I mean, it had to been back then because like, if you go to Guinea or Senegal, like majority of the population is Muslim. It obviously didn't happen overnight.
So I would say back then, if you're talking about around the time of the Sahaba, I would say Islam didn't expand like in a large area, because at this point, between the passing of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Abu Bakr became Khalifa, Usman, Sayyidina Umar, then Usman, then Ali. Now when it reached Ali, at that point Islam expanded from North Africa, Asia, only the Arabic part, and a little bit to China. It touched China because a Sahaba called Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas was sent to China to spread Islam. So people became Muslims. But it was challenging for them to come to Mecca because first you need to have I don't know how they call it again, a lot of food and water. Have a camel or a horse where you would put that, because when you would use that to travel, for example, Imam Malik, when he traveled from no, not Imam Malik, someone from Morocco. It was someone who wanted to learn to Imam Malik. Someone from Morocco once traveled from Morocco to Medina, and it took him 3 months. He had a camel. So I would say it depends on your location, because if it's China, that's way far. If it's Morocco, that's way far. But if you're like in close area like Egypt, you know, that wouldn't be, because you have the Red Sea, you can take a boat and travel. But if you're not in those areas, if you're like North Africa or you're at Asia, you would have to spend like 3 to 4 or more months, and you have to have a lot of food, you know, have a camel. But back then it was difficult, because back then many people weren't rich. They didn't have, you know, enough money to do that. Now if you're talking about like the 80s, the 90s, around that area, I would say Islam spread everywhere. So people were able to travel, and some would use like camels and spend like 3 months on the road. Some would use airplanes. But if it's North Africa, like there are some people who would travel like back like the old ways.
We'll start again.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
We have a question here. What question do you have about
What's your question?
After 700, 3,000 degrees, that's a lot of people, and there was a Muslim that was having school, and we really want to go there. Maria and me wants to go there.
So what's your question? You wanna ask a question about this? Do you know this?
No, not again.
Do you have a question?
Then you gotta listen, Bible, okay? If
Your
you have a
sister?
question related to this, you can ask it.
Okay, your sister, you have a question?
Oh,
Yeah?
yes. But what Muhammad dies at?
What age?
Go there. No, I said what Muhammad dies at.
Oh, that it's in Medina, because when he conquered Mecca and gave this message, he returned to Medina, you know, and stayed there. Yeah.
When you go, is everything just ready for you, or do you have to like pay for it in
Or do you
advance?
have it?
People like stay there for.
I think
It's just like going to a cruise or going for vacation to a place. You never know. You have two options. To make it easy for you, you can contact a guide, a touristic guide,
No,
to take
this-
you on and you will listen. You can contact a guide and pay him money. You know those touristic guys. They can take you to the specific place you need to know. For the hike, now, if you don't know anything about market, it's better to go to agencies. They're well organized. They know where you should start and where it ends. You have hotel room already booked for you. They for transportation, and they have their own guide who know the different steps of the hike. What you need to say when you go to a specific place, when you live there. So it's easier for you. You're gonna pay more, but it's less risky because there are certain things. It's just like performing your wudu or the prayer. There are some obligatory parts and some traditional parts. So if you don't know very well those things, it's better to go follow a guide who's gonna help you perform the hike. But if you learn it and you know it very well, you don't need all that. It's just like when you want to live here and go to Paris for your first trip. You're gonna go online, book a hotel. Once you go there, you have the specific place you want to visit. Whenever you need to go, you just book an Uber or call a cab. Once you go there, you know what you're there for. It's just the same thing. But the hike is a specific time. You have to do it. It starts from, I think, the beginning of the month to the after the sacrifice. So each day there are certain things you have to do. But after that, if you just want to visit the country, you can still go and visit.
Have you ever been there?
No, not yet.
My grandma went, but I didn't answer a lot of
But as soon as you can, you have to do it. Because it's one of the 5 pillars of the religion. The mistake we're making, I know we're trying to honor our parents and gratify them. But before you send somebody to hike, if you have the possibility to do it, you have to do it. You have to perform it by yourself. So you can complete your deen instead of having someone else do it while it's depending on you. It's good to send parents, but you have to do it first before you send anybody. It's just like if you owe somebody money, you have to pay him first before you go give it to someone else.
Excuse me.
Does anybody else have questions?
Excuse me.
Okay.
Excuse me.
So it's 4. So we have finished the part of the messengers of Al-Iman. So when we arrived at the messengers, we made an introduction. Then we talked about the stories of some prophets. Muhammad ﷺ was the last person that we were talking about. So next Sunday, inshallah, we're going to focus on the next section, which is Judgment Day. Al-Iman, the book said, believe in these 6. Allah, the messengers, the angels, the holy books, Judgment Day, and the holy decree. So we're going to talk about Judgment Day. After that, we go to the holy decree. And then we're going to wrap up. Make sure that every single one of you understands Al-Iman, what we said so far, at least. Before we go to Al-Islam, because Al-Islam, that's going to take a lot of time. But before we go there, we have to go through every single one of you, make sure you understand Al-Iman. And the best way to review Al-Iman is to go through the videos. Everything is there. You have plenty of time, at least 30 minutes, turn on the TV, watch one video, take notes for one day. That's enough. And then the next day you do the same for the others. So see you next Sunday, inshallah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.